Hello, everyone. My name is Katalina Garcia, and this is my presentation on effective communication in higher education. Okay. Get going. So, like I said, my name is Katalina Garcia. I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from Fresno Pacific University, and I'm currently working on my master's degree in biology with a focus in education. So this video is going to be the techniques and the protocols that I will enact to foster effective communication as well as a positive relationship in my classroom. This is between me, the instructor, and my students, as well as fostering communication and a positive relationship interpersonally between students. So in this video, I would talk about the techniques and possible challenges and the solutions to these said challenges. So first, we're going to be starting off with 3 strategies that I intend on using to foster effective communication. This first strategy I'm going to be talking about is understanding my audience and adjusting to different audiences. So what I mean by audiences is whether I'm talking in a big classroom, the logistics of that, or if I'm talking one-on-one with a student, if I'm talking to a group of students, if I'm talking to my colleagues about work. So just adjusting to my audience, mainly if I'm talking one-on-one with a student compared to if I'm talking to a group of students or the whole classroom. So when I adjust, I will change things like my speech, my style, the tone, as well as the presentation format that I use with my body language. If I'm one-on-one with a student, I might be more relaxed versus if I'm talking to a whole student, the whole student body, the whole classroom, I might be more formal in my mannerisms and or communication styles. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy I will be using is being a patient listener. What I mean by this is that I will be sensitive to how my students are receiving the information that I am giving, and also listening to them when these complications or critiques or conflicts arise. So I'm not just waiting to speak, but I'm actively listening, wanting to understand my students. The third strategy I will use to foster effective communication will be using precise language. As an authoritative figure in the classroom, students are going to tend to take everything that I say, whether about the material or about the classroom logistics, to heart. So if I jokingly say something about a test or the material we're covering, they're going to take that to heart. And take that as fact, as truth. So to combat any future confusion that may arise from this, I'm going to be clear and follow up any logistical or serious information in writing through an email. So if I make an announcement in class, it may not be clear to some students, whether they pop in and out of attention or if their focus is off. To be clear about this, I will go ahead and follow up with an after class email, just clarifying and laying down exactly what I meant to say, even if I, messed up there. So yes, using precise language. These were my 3 strategies to foster effective communication. Again, that's understanding my audience, adjusting to my audience, being a patient listener, and using precise language to diminish confusion. So next, 2 challenges to communication. The first challenge I may run into is being too clear or spoon-feeding my classroom material to students. I don't want to do this because I want to foster critical thinking. So a certain level of appropriate ambiguity when I am lecturing will foster this critical thinking as students are able to express ideas, make their own connections to material, as well as using critical thinking to connect the dots in the material in their brains. So that's the first challenge that may come up, is if I'm spoon feeding my information. I would combat that with appropriate ambiguity. The second challenge that may occur is that students may become disruptive if they're too comfortable with, in any sense, I guess, if they're disrupting classroom or dominating discussions, or if they're acting in an uncivil or rude way. This is probably something that most teachers deal with, probably less so in higher education, but it still pops up here and there. So how I would combat this is to reinforce the classroom etiquette, reinforce classroom rules, create space between the students and myself so that they do understand that, like, there is a certain level of respect that needs to happen, especially in higher education, as there's like so much material to cover. So yes, these two challenges may come up. The first one, again, being spoon feeding my information. And then the second one being if I run into students who are acting out of classroom etiquette. So those two challenges may come up, and then I would combat them as I spoke about already, respectively. So next, 2 strategies for de-escalating conflict between instructor-student as well as student-student. So instructor-student conflict is really important to break down as fast as it happens, I would say, because again, the student is learning from the instructor. So if there's conflict that is prolonged, then that may affect the student's learning outcome, how successful they are. So 2 strategies that I would use to combat this, de-escalate the conflict between instructor-student would be not making conflict personal, and then identifying and quickly resolving the conflict. So by not making the conflict personal, I'm allowing myself and the student to separate our personal emotions from the problem at hand. This is just for efficiency. If our emotions are put to the side and we can clearly talk about the problem, which leads me to my second strategy for instructor-student conflict. I would clearly try to and intentionally seek out the problem with the student and try to give a solution. So we're not just talking about, or we're not, what I mean to say is that as an instructor, I wouldn't try to ignore the problem, but I would ask the student face on, head on, where the problem seems to be so that we can resolve it. And then the solution may vary from problem to problem. For student to student conflict resolution, I would obviously facilitate that. And so the 2 strategies I would use is to, again, have students try and separate their emotion from the outcome of the problem, and then have them first. My second strategy would be to have them first get comfortable with conflict. Conflict, when dealt with correctly, can result in collaboration and creativity. So conflict is not always negative, and I would explain this to my students. That would be my first strategy. And my second strategy being, again, having them separate emotion from the outcome so that the problem at hand can be worked out, and the time spent is spent efficiently trying to resolve a problem instead of trying to beat around hurt feelings between students. Although those feelings are valid and should be talked about, I think by separating them, we can use our time more efficiently. So those are my 2 strategies for these 2 different scenarios. Lastly, I believe, how communication can foster student success and a positive environment. So communication is the foundation of every classroom. It's the foundation of student learning, because an instructor should effectively communicate, or has to effectively communicate, for a student to be successful in the classroom. And so positive communication can foster student success whenever an instructor is successfully communicating the material and advocating for the student's learning in the environment. And then when the learning environment is positive, it allows students to feel at ease, and subsequently allowing in-depth learning, especially critical thinking. So if you have a safe learning environment, a positive learning environment, then this fosters student success, because if a student feels safe and at ease in a classroom, they're more likely to ask questions when they're confused. They're most likely to participate in discussions. They're most likely to have those critical thinking that implement the information into their brain. So positive communication, efficient, effective communication will lead to student success through a positive learning environment. So that was my mini presentation on how I intend on using effective communication strategies and techniques in higher education. Again, my name is Katalina Garcia. Thank you very much.